windy and, well, actually not so much windy, but a wet and overcast Melbourne. We'll give you a quick look. Oh, getting all this out. That's Port Phillip Bay. As you can tell, not much to look at. It is July, so it is a wet time in Melbourne, of all other things. So, sorry, got my stupid German Shepherd dog trying to get out from under my feet. So from me and JJ there in the background, welcome to the Charlie Kirk. What do I call it? That's how often I'm getting off. The Eureka Conservative Charlie Kirk Bible reading Bob Rant. So anyway, yeah, it's not great weather in Melbourne. Not getting on anywhere near as much as I like on these. I've given up on getting a Bible read each day. So I just can't get there anymore. So, and thank you, Elbow, and all that. And Jacinta Allen for making life so difficult for us business owners that we're also flat out. As it is, school holidays, so I've got a bit of downtime. So I can get on here before I do my podcast tonight. So whenever I do get on, I'll just read that day's passage out of the Bible. I should be doing a lot more of this, as we all should be. But anyway, it is what it is. So for July 2nd, Jesus, the real vine. John 15:5-17. Jesus shows that being united to him, obeying his commands, loving one another, and living fruitful lives are all intimately connected. We need to hear more of that. I am the vine, and you are the branches. Whoever remains in me, and I in him, will bear much fruit. For you can do nothing without me. Whoever does not remain in me is thrown out like a branch and dries up. Such branches are gathered up and thrown into the fire, where they are burnt. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, then you will ask for anything you wish, and you shall have it. I would love that. My Father's glory is shown by your bearing much. My Father's glory is shown by your bearing much fruit, and in this way you become my disciples. I love you just as the Father loves me. Remain in my love. If you obey my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I obeyed my Father's commands, and I remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be complete. My commandment is this: love one another just as I love you. The greatest love a person can have for his friends is to give his life for them. And you are my friends if you do what I command you. I do not call you servants any longer, because a servant does not know what his master is doing. Instead, I call you friends because I have told you everything I've heard from my Father. You did not choose me. I chose you and appointed you to go and bear much fruit, the kind of fruit that endures. And so the Father will give you whatever you ask of him in my name. This then is what I command you: love one another. Great passage. And when I read a passage like that, I sort of realize I'm not the world's greatest Christian. We have a key, as for those who don't follow me would know, but I'm a sports coach. And, you know, you've got to know your limitations in sports, and I think in life. And my limitations, as I've gotten older, I've just come to terms with the fact that all I can be is the best Christian I can be, which compared to others is not great. But it's better to have some faith than no faith at all. And my faith is a lot better than a lot of people's, but compared to the really ones of real deep faith, it's not real great. So, you know, I mean, that thing about me being in Jesus and Jesus being in me, I think there's probably different degrees of that. So when he talks about whatever you ask for, he'll grant or whatever, I certainly haven't received any of that. So I'm pretty sure my faith probably doesn't go as far as it probably should. But like I say, I try. And you know, there are parts of my life. There's my dog, like this one in the background. Here he comes. He's coming to say hello. Always comes to say g'day, don't you, mate? Yeah. I think there's also parts of your life you've got to be grateful for. You know, so no matter what happens, life is sent. I mean, no matter how much. For example, I'm about to go on a bit of a Bible rant here, so excuse me. But no matter what passage you read in your Bible, it can be so contradicting at times. But at the same time, you can find parts that unify all of it. So, you always get from those who don't have any faith, well, why does God let these things happen? But if you read enough of the Bible, you understand that no matter how bad things happen, God's there with you through it, through the very worst things. He was with his son Jesus through his crucifixion. And people have gone through some awful atrocities, but very few match what Jesus went through. So why did he forsake his son, as Jesus said on the cross? So, and in that passage, he's talking directly to his disciples. And if you want proof of the life of Jesus, just go and study the death of his apostles. They went through some of the most horrifying deaths. They were put to that death because they want, pretty much all of them, the people who put them to death want them to renounce Jesus, which they refused to do. So if Jesus, for example, wasn't a real person, why would those people willingly go to the horrendous deaths and not renounce him? If he wasn't a true person, surely you would renounce him straight away. So I'll put that argument to a number of people over the journey, and no atheist can really answer that question. What they come back to you most times with is, oh, well, he wasn't true, so they weren't really apostles. But they still can't answer, well, why did they die for him? If he wasn't true, why did they go to these horrific deaths? And then they sort of make up some conspiracy, be it how it wasn't a true death or whatever. How would you know? But anyway, despite it being the most documented book in the history of mankind, and studied book in the history of mankind. So it's all quite. We live in a very strange world where people can say we're really in the podcastistan, as they call it now, and it really is. It's like its own sort of country where it's the Wild West of the internet, where you can basically get on and say whatever the hell you like, and have no repercussion for it. And sorry for those who I might offend with this, but for example, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, they go on there and they lie, and then the very next day they're coming up with some justification for the lie, or they're backtracking from the lie where they're saying, I didn't say that, when there's evidence, online video evidence of them saying that exact thing. So you can pretty much get online now and say whatever the hell you want. You can twist history the way you want. You can twist facts the way you want. And then it's up to people like us to interpret that. So it's a kind of crazy world we live in. Just as an example, we had Elbow in the past week having a crack at Karl Stefanovic. I had a crack at Karl Stefanovic this morning, but at least I'm consistent with it. Elbow actually went on Karl Stefanovic's show not long ago and said how good it was for him. Now he's saying he's going to some deep, dark holes on the far right and all that. I mean, Elbow's just a liar. He just twists things. Anything that can help his poll numbers and all that, he'll say and lie and do anything to get in power. And that's not unusual for a politician. A lot of Malcolm Turnbull was exactly the same. So, the standard of our politics, if you're old enough like me, you've seen the decline in the standard of politics and individuals with it for quite some time now. I mean, all politicians lie to a degree. Every single one of them. But you at least, for example, Bob Hawke and John Howard, they've all got their critics. But I was lucky enough to live through that as a young person, and they were the best times of my lives under those two prime ministers. And I would argue that was probably the best time in the history of this country to be young. You lived free. You didn't worry about politicians too much. They didn't interfere with your life too much. You got on with life. You went and got your wage. You never had the youth going through all the issues they're facing today. And they try and make out, my generation, the Boomer generation, that we never had any issues. I remember talking to my brother, for example, and my brother has been very successful in life. And he was telling me how I was curious then on home ownership. I think every young person is curious in home ownership. At that stage, I had ambitions to have a family and do all the normal things. That changed later on in life. Not for bad reasons, by the way. Won't go into that today. But he explained the pathway to getting a house. And I remember when he explained it, I'll never get there. I don't have the wage to get there. but I never had anyone explain to me really, and I totally understand. It's not like today where you can go on Google and you can type in a issue you're facing and get information back. I wish we had that when we were younger. My life would have been quite a bit different. But back then, for example, if you wanted to do a marketing campaign, Generation X is never going to understand this, or Generation Z. If you wanted to do a marketing campaign by then, it was all via the mailbox. You actually had to get a database with people's addresses in it, print off what you wanted to send and put them all in envelopes and post them off for people. You're paying postages. Today, I can do that on social media. And if I wanted to, which I've done a couple of times, I can send a message to everyone who follows me in their DM. And it would cost me about $100 US to do it for a year. So there could be free ways of doing this as well. And if you get really good at it, you can get your message out there on things like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all those. I mean, Facebook is now antiquated for a lot of people. But you can get your message out there via social media without paying a cent. I know on my business, I'm actually starting to get leads via Google, and I'm not even advertising on Google. So compared to what we had to go through, where you used to have to actually physically go out and put things in the mail, times have changed. So it's a lot easier, for example, to get that information than what you used to be able to do it. To get this information, you used to have to go down to news agents, buy books, read magazines, do all that. Now it's at your fingertips. And yet the younger generations think they've got it harder. And in some ways they do. In other ways they don't. It's never been, even with the onerous government we've got, it's never been easy to get the information you need to be successful. But people just don't utilise that sort of information at their fingertips. So even when we were younger, in my days, under Hawke and Howard, we had many of the same issues that they have today. The thing today is all those issues get magnified because of not just social media, mainstream media, all the conversations we get on. We're being exposed to different ideas through a lot of these podcasters now that you never even considered. I think that's a big issue behind the rise of anti-Semitism. Some of the theories you get out there that you just know as an older person like me are absurd. They're getting pushed upon people. I mean, we even had can't remember his name. He's a prick of a guy. He's an ALP minister, and he's on the National Press Club today. And he called Robert Menzies, of all people, a Nazi appeaser. A Nazi appeaser. I mean, he actually went to war. It wasn't John Curtin that declared war for Australia in World War II. It's Robert Menzies. He went to war with the United Kingdom against the Nazis. How in God's name can it be a Nazi appeaser? I'll try and get his name up. I think it's, oh God, I don't want to say it. Press Club speech today. Let's see what he does. See, like I'm saying, National Press Club, ABC View. So I can get anything I like. And Pat Conroy, total dickhead. What? So there you go. Live stream example of how I can get information exactly as I want it today, these days. So Pat Conroy said Robert Menzies was a Nazi appeaser at a National Press Club address. Imagine if Pauline said that about John Curtin. Now, Dad, who fought in New Guinea, he always said to me John Curtin was the best PM we ever had. But don't forget, the ALP of World War II is a very, very different beast to the ALP of today. The ALP of World War II would not recognise, it would disown the modern version of the ALP. The ALP of World War II, for example, believed in the White Australia policy. I mean, the ALP of modern times is so far away from that, it is ridiculous. The ALP of World War II was attached to the mother country. Don't forget, it wasn't until after World War II that we actually became Australian citizens instead of British citizens. So totally different worlds that we're living in. and less than a century later. It's amazing how quickly the world has changed since the end of World War II. And for a lot of us sons and daughters of that generation that went through World War II, we've witnessed so much of it. And we're witnessing it accelerate as every year goes on. The changes are just becoming bigger and quicker all the time. And it does make it hard sometimes to comprehend it. But you keep up. You keep, every day you wake up, you get on with life. Life gets shorter the longer you stay in it. And we know we're coming increasingly closer to the end than the start. So younger ones just need to be careful, I think, that they don't get too wound up by all of this. I can just see, they talk about mental health, for example, for the young ones, and that's a valid point, and especially young men. I've had too many friends that have taken their own lives over the pressure that life brings onto them. But these days, that pressure comes in all sorts of forms, and you can easily get caught up in it all. You just got to I did this the other day. You got to take some time off and get a dog. For no other reason. One, dogs are magnificent. They will cuddle up to you on the couch, but more importantly, they get you out of the house. I have to take him because he's got so much energy for long walks. And we just get out, we walk the streets, we look at houses, we go to butchers, we see some great babies, we go watch the local footy, and we connect with real life instead of what we see on social media all the time. I get in conversations with strangers. When I go down the local footy grounds just down the road. So on Sunday, we went around and just had a look at the local, being an ex-footballer. I wanted to see what it's like. And it just brought back memories flooding of what it was like when I was involved in my footy club back in the country. So, it was a junior footy game. So we're walking around, and because I've got the dog, and everyone loves him when I take him for a walk because he's such a beautiful breed of dog, and he's on the ground now. And large dogs aren't as common as they used to be. Everyone's got these little poodles and labradoodles and all that. So when they see a German Shepherd like it, everyone wants to come up and pat him. So when that happens, you naturally get in conversations. So it is interesting to get into those conversations with the real world. And I was saying today on the Twitter, it's interesting. Last night at Parliament, they had their big winter ball, right? And today was their last day in question time before their winter recess. And, Albo and that continually claim, and so have the Liberals over their journey, that they're there for everyday Australians. And I'm listening to Question Time today, and these guys couldn't be further divorced from everyday Australians if you paid them, which we do, sadly. Everyday Australians haven't got the time or the money to be going out to big fancy ballrooms dressed up to the nines in outfits that cost, in some cases, probably tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. We don't have the time, we don't have the money, we don't have the resources, and we certainly don't have the ability to take a winter recess, especially if, like me, you're running your own business. And my government has just made it harder and more expensive from the 1st of July to run that business. They've increased my, I've got no choice in it. I've got and look, I can understand the arguments for and against it. But the fact is they've raised the minimum wage, and I can understand the arguments for it. But when they do that, they do make expenses for business higher. And then businesses, I did it this week, I got a massive response. So when I, as a business owner, have to raise my salaries for any employees I have, my expenses obviously increase. Not only do that, you've now got payday super, where you've got to actually pay the super for your employee on their payday. Now, I'm lucky. I don't have many employees, but there could be business owners out there that have 25 employees. All of a sudden, their business costs have gone right up. So they're going to have to either pass that on to their customers, or they're going to have to absolve that into their profit, which means they get hurt. Or worse, if they're on the brink, which a lot of businesses are, they might go out of business, and all of a sudden those 25 employees don't have a job, and now they're on the dole, and now they're struggling to pay the rent. They could be get kicked out. They could be in the rental queues battling with everybody else for a rental property, and yet these bastards are off at their ball in their fancy suits taking a winter recess. What have they done to earn a winter recess? The nation is crippled under massive debt. We've never been more divided than what we currently are. The optimism of a better future has disappeared in great numbers. We've got mass immigration as a big issue that is dividing this country everywhere you look. And our politicians try to say, well, it's not a thing. You know, it's just, I mean, you can't even have one politician saying, hey, we believe, for example, it wasn't a controversial statement, this. Pauline Hanson goes, well, I want multiracial Australia, but I want a monoculture Australia. Now, if you listen to a speech, it was perfectly reasonable. I listened to a speech. Now, a monoculture Australia is not a hard thing to understand the way she explained it. It's actually very straightforward, easy thing to understand, easy thing to support. It is not telling people they can't speak their old country's language in their house. But if you're going to be in the public, if you're going to apply for a job, if you're going to apply for citizenship, you need to be able to speak English. So that doesn't stop you from being able to speak Russian, Chinese, Japanese, Indonesian, Indian. You can speak all those languages, be multilingual. Human beings are very capable of doing that. But if you're going to live in Australia, something has to be compulsory, is you can actually speak a decent mode of English, that you can read a book in English, that you can write English words. Why is that controversial? If I go to China, they're going to demand exactly the same of me. If I go to Japan, they're going to demand exactly the same of me. If I go to Russia, I've got to be able to speak Russian. I mean, you come to Australia, you've got to be able to speak English. And the British version of English. I mean, seriously, that's what we're founded upon. Australia wasn't founded by the indigenous people of this land. It was founded by the British. Before the British arrived, there was no Australia. It was just a bunch of indigenous tribes that called this continent their home. They had their indigenous names, which we're told about, every welcome to country and all that sort of thing. And I've got no problem with their history being known, as long as there's an acknowledgement of how Australia was established. Again, none of that is controversial, but people keep trying to make it controversial. And the very politicians that are dividing this country, ruining our economy, sending our future generations spiraling into debt, have just gone into recess for the winter. Good life. You know, and they get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. Albo is one of the best rewarded leaders of a country on the planet. You know, $500,000 a year, $500,000 a year to do all this damage. And it was interesting. And it's just not the ALP, for example. When I was listening, and I always have question time in the background, and sometimes I listen to a lot of it. I just have it in the background because I'm waiting for that one great question or one highlight, because there's not much highlights in question time, I have to say. So I sort of put myself through the horror of listening to it. But it dawned on me today, one of the big problems for the Liberal Party is there's not a person that sits in their ranks in that parliament that can solve their problems, that can come and be the leader. There's a bit of talk about Angus Taylor. Who replaces Angus Taylor? Andrew Hastie? He wants to take on One Nation more than he does the ALP. Andrew Hastie's going to get voted out in the next election. I've got no doubt about that. I'll never forgive Hastie. And I was a big supporter of Hastie last year. But when he voted for those hate speech laws, that was it. You cannot be a Liberal and vote for those laws. Yet they did. They did. So the Liberal Party died on that day. It had nothing to do with Bondi. Their polls nosedived the day they passed that hate speech laws in Parliament, thanks to Susan Lowe. And Angus Taylor's got Mission Impossible. There's no way. I don't care who the leader of the Liberal Party is, unless you purge the moderates out of that party, make them go join the Teals. Tony Abbott, this is up to you. You're never going to have a united party that can take on the ALP. And further, I think you need to go outside the party and approach someone, not someone. I think you need to approach a leader. So, for example, there was Dan Tehan, who's the manager of opposition business. He's useless. Today, Albo was trying to say he has leadership ambitions. Well, and that's when it sort of dawned on me, well, who would there be? If Taylor goes, who's their next leader? I mean, I don't think they've got one. Seriously, have a look at their front bench. Melissa McIntosh wants to rebrand the party. I mean, she handballed the ALP, the biggest gift this week. They've been hitting the LNP and Angus Taylor over the head with that all week. And they will continue to hit him over the head. It is a mismatch in Parliament at the moment. And I'm not talking about numbers. The ALP are just better in Parliament. They're better at the politics at the moment. And they've slaughtered the Liberals in Parliament this week. In question time, they've just slaughtered them. So it's very difficult. There was a really good clip this week in the on X with a guy in America, and he was talking about the Supreme Court knocking down one of Trump's executive orders on birthright citizenship. And he said it's very hard as a conservative to see a way out for a better country. God, it resonated with me. It's very hard in this country. We got 2 years nearly to the election, and God, I'm hoping and praying that One Nation can come through. But I'd be lying to say if I didn't have my doubts. And just for the fact, do they have the resources behind them to be able to pull this off? I'm not sure. Will their candidates be good enough? I'm not sure. Will the media tear them down? Are Australians brave enough to support her when the media, mainstream media, and the people on the internet, they're going to try to tear them down? And I said the other week, if not now, when? Everyone's been bitching about the uni party for a decade. We've been waiting for one of the minors to come through. Now, personally, if I was going to choose out of any of the minor parties 2-3 years ago, it would have been the Victorian Libertarian Party. I think they've got real people in there. Just make note, the Victorian Libertarian Party. I think they've got people there of real integrity who really do care about this country. But I've always said I just wanted one party to challenge the other majors. I'd get behind them. So that party is One Nation. Now, I agree, I'm a conservative. I agree with so much of their platform. So I'm quite happy to get behind their party and their policy. They're the ones that have emerged. Could it have been another party? Yeah, but they haven't emerged. Jared Rennick is over there and he's bitching about Pauline Hanson and One Nation every day. And that's got nothing to do more than with green-eyed envy. He's just pissed off. His party, the Jared Rennick People's First Party, that is just merged with the party that's got sympathies with the Chinese Communist Party, by the looks of it. He's just pissed off it's not his party that's emerged like One Nation is. And people get behind him, but what they don't admit to is if Jared had, and I liked Jared for a while. I had a crack at him a while ago when, not long ago, he was getting stuck into One Nation when the minors should be on the centre right, should be supporting each other. It's something the Liberals aren't learning at the moment, for example. But Rennie just came out and attacked Pauline, attacked Melbourne Roberts, attacked the One Nation. He did this a while ago and he's back on it again. So he's lost me a bit, and it's all right. I got in trouble today for saying, like Karl Stefanovic, I don't trust Karl Stefanovic. And because he has a history, for example, he on the COVID vaccines, he pushed them. He really lambasted Novak Djokovic when he was kicked out of the country by Scott Morrison. So he's another one who tried to cancel or help cancel Israel Folau. He called him a homophobe simply because he stood by his faith. So, people don't change their spots that quick. So I hope one thing I remain is consistent with my values. I don't worry. Well, I know how many followers I got, but I don't worry about clicks or anything like that. In fact, if I did, I'd probably have a lot more followers. My follower count's gone down a little bit because I've come out with what people construe, for example, as pro-Israel comments, where in fact they're not. I'm just not anti-Israel. All right, there's a big difference between pro-everything Israel. I don't think any government should be believed. I don't think any politician should be fully believed. whether that's Trump or whether that's Netanyahu, whoever. Lately, I've jumped off the Trump train a bit, which I'll explain in my podcast tonight. But, this is a bit long rant. Bear with me. I'll get to my point as we go in. But you got to stand by too many influencers on X, only worried about their clicks, because on X, and here's a problem with social media. If you have the ambitions of making an income, and I've looked into this with my following, I could actually make an income on X. But to get to that, you've got to get a certain amount of engagement. Easiest way to get some engagement, if I wanted to be, I could go anti-Israel, pro-NSN, all this sort of thing, go down that road, and I'd get the engagement I'd need, and I could make an income. I'm not doing that. I've got other ways of making an income. I just get on X to get things on my chest. And it's very therapeutic. If I can make an income out of doing that, that's great. One day maybe, who knows? And if I do, I'll have a crack at it. But I'll tell you what I'm never going to do. I'm never going to, I don't think, so I hope it doesn't come back to bite me. I'm not inclined to be selling merch. Now, that may change later on. Who knows? There's something I'm going to be launching, which will probably include merchandise, but for totally different reasons, not for a political theme, for something else. So, and if you want to sell merch, that's entirely up to you. But those very people, and I hope I'm never this one, and I'd rightly get called out, where you change your values, you change your standards, you change things that you think are integral to who you are as a human being, simply for the clicks, then that's a problem. And there's too many examples of that, and I think you all know who they are, of that out there. So you can be pro-Israel, anti-Israel, pro-Islam, anti-Islam, whatever, but stick to your reasons. And, you know, I copped a bit today for being critical of Karl Stefanovic. Well, I've good reasons to be critical of Karl Stefanovic. Did I try to cancel him? No. I just said, if you're going to, another one I just do not like, Piers Morgan, he's thrown his country under the bus for a radical Islamist. And people say, oh, you're being critical of him. Yeah, well, so I'm allowed to be critical of him. If you've watched me for any length of time, I see the biggest issue against this country is the pro-radical Islamist side, the ones who want Sharia law in this country, the ones who want to tear down our Christian foundations, the ones who won't embed themselves in Australian culture and Australian values, those people. And there's plenty of them now within our country. We've got a massive fifth column, and people aren't waking up to it. You've got the leftists. Look in America. The canary in the coal mine is not Australia. A lot of people said that. The canary in the coal mine is actually England. What's going on in England and what is now going on in America. They are getting radical communists overtaking the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party will soon be the Democratic Socialist Party or the Democratic Communist Party. And they have radical agendas. And soon you've got the Republicans versus that radical one. And yet you've got people like Tucker Carlson, Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens. They're now talking about a third party. That'll just take people from the Republican base, and they're going to allow the rise of this Democratic Communist Party. If that ever happens, God help this world. God help this world. We are in real shit then. And we've got similar things happening here, but people just don't look at it. And Piers Morgan and Karl Stefanovic happily had a buddy, chum chat with Piers Morgan today talking about his sacking. And the ridiculous thing about that conversation is Piers Morgan has tried several times and continues to do it to cancel Tommy Robinson. He defames him every time he gets on. He actually says outright lies about Tommy Robinson. And then, for example, he cheers on his imprisonment for freedom of speech. What would be a freedom of speech issue in the United States? Piers Morgan cheered on his imprisonment. He would never go to prison in the United States for what he did, but in England he did. He had to go serve time. And yet Karl Stefanovic lost his job for interviewing Tommy Robinson, and here's Piers Morgan coming on with Karl Stefanovic being all sympathetic about Stefanovic losing his job for an interview with Tommy Robinson, where Piers Morgan tomorrow will probably get on his program like he did this week and attack, defame and criticise Tommy Robinson without ever inviting him on the show for Tommy Robinson to defend himself. So sort of confusing. I mean, I'm going to get attacked for saying, well, I now know, I can see who I now know because I've seen this play so many times before, who I think Carl Stefanovic is, and I don't really need another Tucker Carlson in my life. I don't need to be going down there. Did I try and cancel him? No. All I said is I dismissed him. I think he'll go down that road. This is part of the things that infuriate me, it seems, about, not infuriates me, frustrates me is probably a better word, about Australians. They're like they're looking to, this knight in silver armour coming on their big horse is going to come in and save us, and here comes Carl. No. Does anyone remember the interview Carl and that silly bitch, can't even remember her name, the interview they did with, what's his name? Craig Kelly? Where Kelly, and this is where Kelly had my support. He was going against the COVID vaccines, and he was basically getting told to shut up because he didn't know what he's doing. And now Carl Stefanovic is coming, oh, well, actually, Craig Kelly was a bit right. So, people can forgive Carl Stefanovic for what he's done. That's fine. But Carl Stefanovic is a person that defamed people that made that argument, that defamed a person in, what's his name? Novak Djokovic for choosing not to take the vaccine. He defamed Israel Folau for standing by his faith and not acknowledging the LGBTQI LGBTQI ideology because of his faith. He called them all sorts of names, and now all of a sudden we're supposed to believe, oh, no, he's on our side. No. If you haven't learned from the people like Candace Owens, Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Megan Kelly, who all were supposedly on our side and now flipped, it's only a matter of time, I believe, before Carl Stefanovic flips and goes to a place we don't want him to go. So I don't rate him. Sorry. And that's fine if you do. I don't care. I don't rate him. Don't trust him. Wouldn't trust him as far as I can kick him. If you think Carl's the answer to our prayers, sorry. I'll disagree, and that's fine. That's freedom of speech. I choose who I want to follow. Just like you watch your favourite movie on Netflix, I'll watch my favourite movie on Prime or something like that. Just because you think a certain player in a football team's a gun and I think another player's better doesn't mean we have to be cast as polarising enemies. It just means we have a difference of opinion. So I did find it amusing today that some people were accusing me of cancelling someone simply for expressing an opinion. That's where I've gone to. That's a bit silly. But the biggest silly part of it was these politicians in Canberra who think they're connected to us, who've got no idea about the trials and tribulations that we're all going through. It's kind of insane. And I am starting to get to the point, I've been trying to resist this point. A lot of people say there's no way of voting ourselves out of this. I think I'm starting to get to the point, well, maybe there's some substance in that. And I'm hoping and praying that Hanson and One Nation give us that option. But they've got a lot of work to do. And I think right now where they're at, that could be fine. But in politics, there's 2 years. A lot of things can evolve in 2 years. And we've found political parties can change where they are very quickly. So don't trust any of the bastards. And this is not meant to be critical of Pauline Hanson. I think she's done an outstanding job. And I'd love to see her as next Prime Minister as she stands now. But too many times now I've put my trust in politicians only to see them change and do a total 180 on all of us. So we've got to find a way to keep them accountable, not only in elections, but between elections. So, that's something, the boomer generation, we've got to be able to pass on to the next generation, because if it doesn't change, we could be going down a very dark pathway. So anyway, we'll discuss that more tonight. 8 o'clock. All right, the Eureka podcast tonight, 8 o'clock. Hope to see you there. In the meantime, from me and my boy, I can always trust this fellow. I'm sure anybody. Oh, one last thing. I'm going to put this up tonight. Sorry, I need to do this. I just want to show you something. These are our politicians. All right, I'll go into my notifications. Let me get the share up. I just want to make this one last point. So bear with me. I'm nearly done. I've got to get my glasses on. I've had a lot to say, though. Oh, God, I've had a lot of notifications come through. Sorry, guys, bear with me. I think this is just typical, and I can find it. Here we go. This is typical of our politicians. Look at this beautiful animal. Because the greenies, great post here by Mitchell Beer. What on Mitchell? One of the actually famous Brumbies, they even was given a name, Matagi. And look at what a beautiful horse that is. What a beautiful animal. But our government's killed it today. They have to protect the fragile alpine ecosystem. Yet on the picture you have on the right, you have another picture of what the governments are doing to that fragile alpine ecosystem with their insane, I'm trying to think of the word, their insane capture of their brains to the renewable industry, to the climate change ideology. So the beautiful product of nature on the left, that magnificent horse, which is loved, named by the local community, gets slaughtered, but the one picture on the right continues. So that is what we're dealing with as politicians and governments. They have no shame. They will kill our most magnificent animals to meet their ridiculous ideologies that have captured their thinking, and they don't see the evil in that, to end that horse's life for no other reason than it was an inconvenience. That's our governments. That's our politicians. If you can't be frustrated with that, you're never going to be frustrated with anything, I think. So that's just me. Anyway, that's it. That was a long rant. I'm sorry I haven't been on for a few weeks, so I had to get a bit off my chest, and I haven't even started, really. I've got a lot more. So I begin on tonight, 8 o'clock. I'll have a shave and present a bit better. But from me, from my boys coming up, God bless you. God bless your kids. God bless your grandkids. God bless your pets. God bless, I won't point the wrong way, that flag in this country. And hopefully we'll see you tonight at 8 o'clock, or we'll see you for the next edition of the Charlie Kirk Bible reading Bob Rant. See you, everyone. Bye.